everyone, and welcome back to another Storytime video. Today is going to be a two-part story. Now, this is a rare special treat. How rare is it? In case you don't know, I have been telling Storytime videos on this channel for 5 years. And this is only the second two-part story, this is only the second two-part story that I have ever told in all the Storytime videos that I've ever made. So, this one is going to be about working in a factory. Now, I worked in a factory for a couple of years in between the time when I graduated high school to when I started college. Now, I needed to fill in the 2.5-year gap, but let's just call it 2 years for simplicity's sake. Because for the class that I wanted to take in school, there was a long wait list. And I had actually applied a semester and a half before I graduated high school. Just to give you a little bit of perspective on how long I had to wait. But that's another video. That is for another video. Or, well, another Storytime video. So, I am not going to say the name of this factory that I worked for, because like the Mexican restaurant I used to that I used to work for, if I said the name of this factory, you guys could just Google it and pretty much know exactly where it is, because it is one of a kind. Well, it's not one of a kind, but it's, like I said, if you Googled it, then you guys would pretty much know exactly where I lived. And I don't feel like doxing myself in my own videos, so I'm going to be referring to this factory as the factory. So, at the factory, they make wheel covers. Now, for future reference, when I say wheel covers in this video, take that as me meaning hubcaps. But you do not say that H word in the factory. Because, well, I don't know why. But for some reason, saying the H word, somebody's going to take that out of context and think I'm talking about something really bad. But saying hubcaps there is really bad. Like, I have heard stories. I heard a story right before I graduated high school that they walked someone out of an interview because that person said the word hubcap instead of wheel cover. Now, let me say that that factory makes wheel covers for, let's see, Volkswagen, Toyota, GMC, Chevy, Ford, Dodge, Chrysler, Nissan, of course Tesla. Tesla Tesla made me so mad while I was working there, dude. I could make a whole video about ranting about Tesla. But that's not this video. Let's see what else. What else did made a little bit of Lincoln. Did I mention Honda? I think I mentioned Toyota, but not Honda. And then what else? I think that might be all. But still, they make a lot of car parts. They make a lot of wheel covers per year. I don't know the exact numbers, but in molding, and I'll explain this more in a minute, but in molding throughout a day, if you for certain parts you could make 8,000 a day, assuming the price doesn't go down and it runs all day. It's like, oh my god. Well, not 8,000, but still, it's like it's a big number though. You could you could make 8,000 throughout a day, not one shift. I don't want to say 1,000 parts an hour. That's like friggin' insane. But before I get into this any further, I just want to say that I don't want to say that I don't recommend working in a factory, but I was not the happiest working in a factory. And I don't want people to exactly hinge their decision to work in a factory or not based on this video and the next. Well, part 1 and part 2. Because working in some people can make a career being an operator at a factory. I kind of say career loosely, but you can make a living for yourself depending on where you live, working in a factory. And I feel like I have more potential than just working in a factory. Now, that's not to take anything away from anybody that works in a factory. If you're happy and making money and you're able to support yourself and a family, then more power to you. I mean, I feel like if you're working, more power to you. I used to kind of clown McDonald's and Walmart workers before the coronavirus because I couldn't imagine wanting to work in an environment like that. And maybe you don't choose to, maybe you're just forced to, but still, you're still willing to put up with that. But with the pandemic last year, I don't clown on any job. And I definitely did not clown on factories before. So if you work in a factory right now, I am not trying to put you down at all because you can be happy and work in a factory. And if you are, then more power to you. But it's just not for some people. And I am one of those some people that it's not for. At least as an operator. I would maybe go back as salary. But, yeah. So, getting to the actual meat of the story. And yes, I know I'm 10 minutes in. I anticipated this being a long storytime video, so I recorded longer gameplay footage for this video than I normally do. So, I'm going to start off with orientation. Now, in terms of the stuff that is worth talking about, that I can legally talk about, because I did go into this knowing that eventually I could make a storytime video out of it. So, I was kind of thinking about what I could talk about, but there's not a whole lot that I can legally talk about from the orientation. Basically, she walked us out on the floor, on the production floor, and she went over, she being HR, by the way, HR went over doctor's notes, which were abolished while I was there. Again, I've said it before earlier this video, but I could make a whole storytime video on just the ridiculous stuff that went on there. Which is part of the reason why I wouldn't want to work in another factory as an operator. No. But moving on, before I go too far off topic and potentially rant and get upset. So she went over vacation days, doctor's notes, and what you should do if you had to miss a day of work. Just your standard stuff. And by the way, the interview, they basically asked me like 2 questions. I guess partly because the person interviewing me knew one of my uncles from back when they were kids. The person interviewing me basically asked me if I had reliable transport all 24 hours of the day. It's like, yes, I do. But, so, the factory has, it has 3 main parts of production there. Those being paint line, assembly, and molding. And I worked there in that order. And coincidentally, I spent as much time in paint and assembly as I did molding while I was there. Before school was like, hey, we're ready for you. It's like, oh boy, thank God. But I kind of consider paint and assembly the same thing, even though people that work in assembly there, I guarantee you, would try to distinguish themselves. It's like, when paint and assembly shares basically the same supervisors and boss right over them, as opposed to 2 bosses up, which basically everybody has, then they could be lumped together. And plus, they're kind of separated by a wall, and paint and assembly are on the same side of that wall, and molding's on the other side. So that's why I'm lumping paint and assembly together. On the paychecks, they actually lump them together. So whenever I'd get paid initially, it was like paint and assembly, paint/assembly. It's like, okay. Even though I was fully on Paintline when I first started. Now, back when I first started on Paintline, there was no third shift. So, the first month I started there, which I started in June. So, I'm talking about this partly because this month would have been a service anniversary for me. And I also bring that up because we were trying to pump parts out for shutdown. Which, in case you don't know, a lot of factories in the US, where I live, will typically shut down for a week or two, 4th of July week. And so we were hoping to be able to shut down and have the time off. So we had to work 12-hour shifts. So I basically worked from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. So, worked the afternoon shift and half the graveyard shift. And it wouldn't have been so bad if I hadn't have gotten a sinus infection from the paint fumes in the paint kitchen. Now, I have to say that molding molds the parts, molds the wheel covers that Paintline then paints. So all the parts get a clear coat and mostly silver paint. Now, there are some bicolor parts, like Teslas and the newer Ultimas. The black and gray Ultima wheel covers. Yes, those bicolor ones. That's what I'm referring to in case, yeah. So Paintline paints the parts, and I will get more in depth about molding in 2 weeks. Don't you worry. This is paint and assembly's time to shine. So I was getting sick from the paint fumes in the paint kitchen. I did not originally know this, so sometimes we would work 6 days a week at this point. So sometimes I would have to deal with bad sinuses 6 days a week and be exposed to it. Well, I'd have to deal with it all 7 days, but you get my point. I would have to be exposed to it 12 hours, 6 days a week, so it was bad. And so basically in Paintline, the parts get painted. Like I said, they get a clear coat and then they normally get silver paint. And then they get unloaded off the line. And then they come down the line And depending on the part, it might take all 14 or 15 operators that we have, or it just might take 4. It just all depends on what we're running. Or somewhere in between. But, yeah, so whatever secondary operations you have, you do down the line, and then you pack the parts. Whether that be in a plastic tub or a box, it all depends on how the company that we are supplying the parts to wants us to pack the parts. Like, Nissan might want us to put all the parts. Well, Nissan might want us to put each individual part into a rectangular box. I know with Dodge, we put 18 small little parts into a plastic tub, for example. And normally, I didn't have to pack, as I carved out a niche where I was basically the dedicated emblem person, where I got so good at putting on the emblems for Tesla and Ford and Chevy, Nissan, whatever needed an emblem. When I was working on the paint line, I took care of it. So I can't give you a whole lot of details when it comes to packing, because I never really had to pack parts. Which I kind of like that. I didn't have to deal with the chaos of the pack end down there, and I could basically meditate in my own little world and kind of talk to the line unloader, even though we were standing like 10 to 15 feet apart. I mean, it's a factory. Of course, you're gonna friggin' shout everything all the time. I mean, that's how it works. But, and then in assembly, I voluntarily moved to assembly where, oh, by the way, before I jump off paint, I just remembered, and I would love to say, after that first month of being on paint line, it was normally like 3 o'clock to 1 o'clock. So first shift didn't have to wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning. They could just be there at 5 o'clock. And that there would be 4 hours there where there was no production running. I know some people just cringed at that. It's like, how? How is that really great? It's like, it's not. But it's not. It's not something that I could really control. But hey, they were still aiming to pay people overtime regardless. So, and yes, we were working 5 days a week at that point. We weren't working 4 10s, we were working 5 10s. But let's see, I was on paint line for about 7 months. 4 months in, they hired enough people so that we could have a third shift on paint line. So that was a big relief to get off at 11:30 as opposed to like 1 o'clock. And I say 11:30 because they, in order for us to get up to 40 hours, they had us stay and clean for a half hour because they didn't pay us for lunch. So that's why all of a sudden it's 11:30 now instead of 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Well, I'm saying half past as opposed to on the hour. So, yeah. Okay, I moved to assembly and I stayed there for 2.5 months. Well, I spent more time in molding, actually. Yeah, I spent 2.5 years at this place. I spent less than a year on paint line and molding. Or paint line and assembly. But then again, when I was in molding, especially toward the end of my run, if they needed people on paint line and they could afford to take me off of a press in molding, they would put me on paint line for the day. So if they didn't necessarily need me in molding and they needed people over in paint, they would absolutely move me because I had the experience of working in paint line. So technically, it is it is more even than I thought it was, or than I think it was. So, but regardless, I spent 2.5 months in assembly, and I helped make some Toyota parts. And I moved there because I was working in paint line like that last night that I was there on paint line, and the assembly supervisor for first shift they had at the time, she of course stayed as long as it took to get the paperwork done, which meant that it bled over to our shift like an hour or so. And so she was asking people if they wanted to work in what they called the Toyota cell, which is actually not there anymore, as far as I know. I'd heard that they were going to move that like 3 separate times and they never did it yet. I think it's gone. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it is. Regardless, though, I keep getting off topic. Gosh darn it. Okay. Getting back on topic. I worked in Toyota Cell for 2.5 months, and I moved there because I saw where people on the paint line were kind of walking around, and they needed people in Toyota Cell. So I was like, you know what? I do want to move to Toyota Cell and move to assembly. And so I did end up moving to Toyota Cell like the next day. Now that part of the allure that took me there was the fact that I could work 4 10-hour shifts and have every Friday off. So basically, I would work Monday through Thursday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 1:30 in the morning. And so that was that definitely helped out. And so I liked that. And we struggled in the beginning. I distinctly remember struggling in the beginning to get to the number where they wanted, because you could distinctly see the number of parts that you put out in an hour and the amount of parts that first shift ran throughout the day, because they never cleared their counter. And why would they? I mean, it's not that important. It's like, so why not clear it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you clear it or not. So instead of clearing it, they just decided not to. We never did. And so they always saw our numbers. But working in assembly wasn't that bad. And I actually liked it. I worked with this one person most of my time while I was in assembly, and I liked him. But it's a funny story about him. He left mid-shift. Like, we typically, on second shift, went to lunch at, well, call it lunch. We ate at 6 o'clock in the evening, so dinner, essentially. So we had dinner at 6 o'clock. And his last day, he worked up until dinner, basically, lunch, and he didn't come back from lunch. He did not come back from lunch that day. And it's really disappointing. I was really disappointed, but apparently he got a better job making more, so I can't fault him. I mean, I don't necessarily know if it was a better job, but I mean, it was away from factory, which is what I wanted to be away from. But I didn't necessarily want to cycle through jobs. So that's why I stayed there as long as I did until I went to school. But he did end up making more money at this new place that he left to work for. And the supervisor I had said that he didn't even tell her that he was leaving. Like, he just walked out during lunch. But yeah, so I moved from assembly to molding, and what enticed me and made me want to go to molding is that it was a first shift job. I think everyone, if they choose to work in a factory or are stuck there, I think their ultimate goal is to get a first shift position, which is from 7 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. And if I could have worked in assembly or paint line on first shift, I would have loved to, which is what I was telling people after they had seen that I signed the paper of people that wanted to go to first shift, because internal job positions like that are posted right next to the time clock. Like, they're posted right above the time clock. So people could see that my name was written there and ask me about it, which I didn't mind. But I wanted first shift because working second shift wasn't terrible, but I would much rather work in the morning and early afternoon and have the rest of the day to myself, like I have now in school, where I go to school at 7:45 and get off at 2:15. It is nice where I have the rest of the night, well, rest of the day and night after that to do what I want, whether it be to play video games, make these videos, study, which is what I do sometimes. I mean, I don't study all the time, but regardless, that's why I moved to assembly, and that's why I moved to molding. And if you have any questions that you want to ask me, because if I talked about this in great detail, I could be here for hours, dude. Like, seriously, I could be here for hours. But I'm just talking about the overall general time there. So I'm not getting too specific because I don't want this video to be longer than Texas. But yeah, I think that is the end of part 1 for today. That will do it for this storytime video and next storytime video, which will be part 2 of the story. I will see you all later. Goodbye, guys! Thank you all for watching.